Hello and welcome. In this tutorial, we'll show you how to use Google Forms for creating student assessments. To get started, you can access Google Forms from your Google Apps. You can scroll down and find the Forms icon. You can drag these around, by the way, in case you want to move that up a little higher if it's something you're going to be using more frequently. You click on Forms, and then you can get started. There are a bunch of different templates that are available to you that you can start with. For purposes of this lesson, we're going to start with a new one. Okay, so the first thing you can do is you can title your form by giving it a name of the assessment. And you might want to put that up here as well, although it looks like if I click up there, it automatically assigns that name for me. Okay, let's take a look at a few tools. Across the top, you can click on the move to a folder and you can reassign the location in your Google Drive as to where you would like to put this assignment or this assessment. And so if you have a specific folder for a class, you can move it to that specific section, or if you have a folder for that topic, you can put the assessment in that topic. And you can also star it. This makes it a little bit easier to find if you're looking for it. There are some add-ons available. Okay, we're going to leave that off. You can change the theme color. And the preview button will allow you to preview your assessment at any time while you're creating it. Okay, under the settings, there's three tabs. There's General, there's Presentation, and there's Quizzes. Okay, let's first look at the General. By default, Google now will collect email addresses for this particular assessment, and this is now a default for any Google form. Okay, if you want to turn that off, you just uncheck it. I like to collect the email addresses just as a backup. Also, if you're emailing scores back to students, if they have email addresses, which I don't believe happens until middle school in our district, you can use this to send students their grades, and that's what this response receipts is. And you can change whether or not students get responses or not. And here, you can require sign-in. So what this allows you to do is restrict the users in WT Schools. All right, so this keeps it within the WT Schools domain or your school's domain if you're not part of WT Schools. You can also limit this to one response per student. So if you don't want them to submit something multiple times, you can limit that. There's some pros and cons to limiting it. Sometimes I don't limit it. This way a student can retake the assessment if they don't do well. Also, if you don't make all of your questions required, in the past, some students have submitted assignments ahead of time before actually completing the assessment, and then they were unable to go back to complete it. So you may or may not want to have that on or off. If you're sending a Google form for a parent to open, then you wouldn't want to restrict it to users within your school's domain, because most parents would be trying to log into that assessment or that assignment or that Google form from their own email address. Okay, but if this is for students, you're probably going to want to restrict it to your school's domain. And you may want the students to be able to edit something after they submit it. If you do, you can check this box. If it's something you don't want them to be able to edit after they submit it, then you can uncheck the box. Okay, and they can see summary charts and text responses of their assessment if this box is checked. Okay, but some of those things are really dependent on your use. Under presentation, I like to show the students the progress bar so they can kind of see how far along they are in the assessment. And sometimes I shuffle the question order. Sometimes I don't. Okay, so really, again, depends on what you want to do. And if you are allowing students to submit more than one response, then you would be able to check this box. You could also add your own personal confirmation message so that when the assessment is done, you can change the default response, which is your response has been recorded. You could change that to something a little more personal if you want to. If you're making this a quiz type of an assessment, you can go underneath the Quizzes tab and you can slide that to make this a quiz, and then you have some other options under there. You can make this a locked assessment, which means once the students begin the assessment, they're not able to jump out of the assessment, and this prevents them from looking up information on other tabs on their on their Chromebook. When you're teaching from home, it's really hard to prevent them from looking outside of the window that you're in. They could always pull out another device, but this is a great tool, and it has proven to be effective, especially in the classroom. You can release the grades to students right after they hit submit if it's automatically graded. This only really works well if you have an assessment that's 100% multiple choice questions, because you can set it up to be graded automatically, and students can get their scores immediately after hitting submit. If you have any questions that you have to read and grade separately from multiple choice, students would only see the portion of the grade that was multiple choice. So sometimes this confuses students. They think they might have had a 50% if 50% of the test was multiple choice and they had it all correct. The short answer and essay questions would not have been graded by the teacher yet, and therefore that grade is not included as part of the total grade at that point. So sometimes I just leave that off until I'm ready to have students look at the work. Okay. If it's all multiple choice, I almost always leave that on. Okay, you can allow students to see the missed questions. You can allow them to see the correct answers and the point values for each question. So that's, again, dependent on what your preferences are. So I'm going to leave those on and then hit save. Okay, so I have my assessment, right? I might give a little bit of a name of what this assessment is about. This quiz is to assess your understanding of something, right? Okay, then what I might do next is ask the student what period they are in. Okay, this for the middle school level is helpful. It allows me to sort all of my data once the assessments have been completed and submitted. And so I like to sort by period. So I'm going to put in the possible period classes that I teach, possibly. Okay, let's get rid of this option 5. And all I did was click in each one of these blank spaces, and I typed in the number of a period. You could add as many as you need. If you need to take any away, you can delete them. I leave this usually as multiple choice, although you can change this to a drop down. Okay, so I'm going to leave it as a drop down so you can see what that would look like. Okay, the next question, to add another question, I would click this add question, and I might ask them what their name is. Okay, and Google's artificial intelligence automatically determines that this is probably going to be a short answer type of a question, whereas the question above was automatically identified as being a multiple choice. But you could see that you can change those. Again, I was able to change that to a drop down because I preferred that. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click over here to add a section, and I'm going to call this multiple choice. Okay, and you can give a description. Here are some directions, please select the best possible choice for each question. Okay, and so then here I might have a multiple choice question. So again, you just change that to multiple choice, and then I put my question in, and then here I would type my possible answers. And I'm just going to keep this short for now, but of course you would type in whatever full responses you would have available. Okay, so that's one type of a question you could ask. Another thing you could do is you can either add a new question, or sometimes I duplicate a question and then I just change the question. This is a really good option if you have several choices that are the same in each question. So if A, B, C, and D were the same exact possible responses for this next question, I would duplicate it and then just change the question. Okay. I don't generally, by the way, number my questions, because if I sort them, and if I allow Google to mix the questions up, which was one of the options under the settings, then numbering the questions could make it confusing for the students, so I don't usually number them. All right, now you can ask another question. It could also be another multiple choice question, and I just wanted to show you that another option you have is for adding an image. So you could click the little image icon there, and you can either use your camera to insert an image, okay, and you'd have to allow that. You could also pick a photo that you already have, or you could do a Google image search. And you can pick an image and you can insert it. All right, so if you were a health phys ed teacher, science teacher, maybe you're doing like parts of the body or parts of the flower, okay. But you could ask, then ask a question. What kingdom does this animal, organism belong to? And then you can give some, some options right here. Okay, now, once all of your questions are done, or while you're building your questions, you can do this either way, you can then set up your answer key. Okay, so under the multiple choice questions, this is really easy to do. You can then just pick this answer key here. I make all my questions required. This is a default in Google Forms, but just so you know that was available. You can set the number of points for each question to whatever point value you want. And then you can select the correct answer for that question. It will turn it green. Okay. If it's a multiple answer type of a question, you can select more than one answer. Okay. So usually if I'm going to do more than one answer, that has to be clear in the question. I would maybe even make that a different section where you have multiple answers. And then I would usually, if there was more than one answer, instead of making it multiple choice, I would usually make that a box type of an answer. And I'll show you that in a minute, where there's check boxes for your responses. Okay, so now that I've selected the correct answer, I can click done. I can move down to the next question, right? And I'll just show you where you can change that. Right, this one here, you could use check boxes. I will usually use check boxes if I'm going to have multiple answer possible. Again, I click the answer key. Okay, and then maybe, this one has 2 possible responses. And then I click done. Oh, don't forget to change your point value. Okay, and then you have your last one here. Answer key, animal, done. Okay, and again, make sure it's required. You can see that I did not change the point value, so it's at 0 points. So I'm going to go back and change that. And click done. All right, now, the first couple of questions, you could see here, this one here. Under the answer key, it's valued at 0 points. Okay, I think that's just something important that you should be aware of. Make sure that you're not assigning point values to, the student's name. If unless you want to give them credit for putting their name on the paper, that would be fine. Okay, so here I only asked for the period, but I also want their name. I thought I did that, but maybe I didn't. So I can always go back and add a question. And there we go. Okay, and I make sure that that's required. All right, so with that, your assessment could be completed. However, if you wanted to, you could always add another section. And you could, make that short answer or essay. Okay, and what you can do is you can click on the More Tools here, and you can move a section. So if I want my short essay to come after my multiple choice, I can just click and drag that here and hit save. Okay. And then, of course, you would have to have a new question. So again, you can add a question. Okay, you can have some sort of a question here, and you can move that, right? So to move it, you hover your cursor over these 6 little gray dots, and then you just drag that down underneath the short essay section. And sometimes you have to do this in a couple of steps. Okay, and now my short essay question is underneath. Okay, now for a short essay question, under your answer key, you can provide some feedback for the student that they would see. You could also, link to a specific website or document that maybe explains this, and then you can hit save and change that point value, and then hit done. Okay, so now your quiz is pretty much set up. You have to know that you can automatically grade short multiple choice questions, true and false questions, but any type of a written response, you still have to go back and read and assign a point value to the student responses. Okay. Underneath these themes, right, you can change these theme colors at any time. You can change font styles. You can change background colors. Okay. You can also choose an image for your header. And there's a bunch of different themes that you can pick from. You can also upload your own if you have one in a file. Click Browse. Okay, if they're on your computer, you could find those towards the top under My Downloads. If you're using a Chromebook, if it was something you just downloaded off the internet, you can click Downloads. If it's in your Google Drive, you can access that from here, from your drive, and you can find photos there. Or you can click on Photos, and you can then search for photos. All right, so I'm just going to pick a theme that's a default theme and insert that, and then that will add a image to the header and slightly changes then my colors. So I'm going to pick a color here, and that's it. Okay, when you're finished, you can preview it. All right, you can see this is what the students would see. They would see this drop down for choosing their period, and they would see their name, right? And you will see there's no questions because we added another section. So after they complete that section, they would click next. Right, so we're just going to run through this one as if we were a student. Okay, now I click next. Here's the multiple choice section. So I'm going to click on some responses. And then click next. And then here's the short essay where I would explain something. Okay, and then they could hit submit. All right, now you can view the score, except again, the score won't be accurate because the short essay has not been graded yet. All right, but I am able to see my responses. Okay, I can see that I got this question incorrect and what the correct answer is because I had those settings turned on. Okay, I can see that I had this question incorrect, but I did receive credit for this question. So I can see what the total point value was of the particular question and how many points I earned. Okay. I can see here that there was no points awarded, were no points awarded yet because the assessment wasn't graded for short essay, responses. All right, now that's what it looks like on the student end. Let's go back and see what it looks like now on the teacher end. So as a teacher, you can, once all of the responses have been submitted, you can click on responses in this form. Okay, you can turn off accepting responses whenever you're finished. You don't have to. I tend to turn this off to prevent students maybe who are absent from accessing the assessment ahead of time. So I would turn this off at the end of each class, or at least at the end of the day, and then not turn it back on again until students were present in class to take the assessment. But that's what that does. So sometimes I just leave it on altogether. Okay, gives you a little overview of all of your all of the questions and all of the students, so you kind of get an idea about how well students understood a certain topic or how well it was taught. Sometimes I see that a high number of students missed a question, and I go back and I look, and either my answer key was incorrect, and if I go back and I make the change to the answer key, the scores automatically get adjusted based on the correct answer that I revised. But sometimes I go in and I see that there was a question just students didn't really understand, and so that gives me an opportunity to go back and reteach it in another way. All right, so you get a little overview there. Okay, you can also look at each question, and you can see how every student did on each question. And you can go through every question for every student that way. You can also go through the individual. Okay, and you can look at the assessment this way. All right, so this gives you an opportunity to not only see the score, but to see specifically how every student did as an individual, or you can analyze each question to see how all students did. Now, there's only one student that completed this assessment in this particular video tutorial, so you're only seeing that same student, so it's almost like looking at the individual. But if I had 50 students or 100 students complete this test, I would see all the students' responses for each question. Okay, the other thing you can do is create a spreadsheet. All right, and so to create a spreadsheet, you just click on that little icon for Google Sheets, and that will create a spreadsheet. You can create a new spreadsheet, give that assessment a name. I usually leave the word responses in the parentheses so that when I'm looking for this particular file, it's very easy to find. Okay, I can then hit create. Okay, and then automatically Google generates a spreadsheet with all of my students' responses. Okay, again, there was only one student that took this assessment in this video, but if I had 100 students, I would have all of the students listed here by period, by name. I would have every response for every question that I asked in the assessment, and I would have their score. Okay, now, what happens if I have to go back and I need to change the scores for students because I have to grade their responses? Okay, so I can go to individual. Okay, I could go down to that essay question, and I can read the student's response, and I can click in here and I can type the number, okay, of the amount of points that they earned for that question based on their response. I can also add individual feedback for the student. Again, I can provide a link to a specific document that might have the answers to the questions. Maybe it's an example response for an essay that you have in a Google Doc. You can link to that Google Doc, okay? Or you can click that little YouTube icon, okay, the video icon, and you can link to a specific YouTube video that might have an example of the response, or it may have the information about that particular question. Okay, once you do that, you can then hit save under that edits are pending. Okay, you can see the student has a score now. The score is going to be updated. So if I go and look at the overall score, I can see that that increased by a few points. And then I can click release score. And then again, if the students have an email address, they'll receive that email with their score. Okay, so that does not work for elementary schools in most districts, but here it will. You'll also notice the score was adjusted in the spreadsheet automatically. I didn't have to do anything to get the updated final scores. So, as a teacher, when I use Google Forms, I often will include essay questions or short answers. It does take some time to go back and review every one of them. Sometimes I'll release the scores and I'll just let the students know in advance that that score only represents the portion that was graded as a multiple choice, and that I would update their scores, for the remaining 6 points that they have available for their essay question or whatever that point value is. Okay. Finally, the last thing I'd like to show you is how do you actually share this assignment or this assessment with the students. Okay, so I kind of jumped ahead and showed you as a teacher how to review the student responses, but how do I actually share that with the students, or how do you actually share that with the students? It's pretty simple. You can click send, and you can send that as an email to students, and if they have emails, that works. I rarely ever would do this. I would use that more if I was sending a survey out to staff. For students, I usually would click this link button here, and then I will click the shorten URL address. Okay, then I would copy that, and then I would move into Google Classroom. Okay, and I would open up the class that I wanted to share that with. Okay, I would go under my classwork tab. I would create a new assignment. Okay, maybe give some instructions here. I would click add, and then I would put link. Paste that link. Control V will paste that link, or you could right click, which on your Chromebook is Alt click, and I would have pasted it that way, right? And then I add the link. Right, I'd probably put a topic in here. And if there's no topic, I would create a topic. So we put maybe today's date. When I'm teaching remotely, I really like to create topics by date. I feel like this is most beneficial to the students. Okay, I probably wouldn't have a rubric in here. I may, put the point value in here. Don't remember how much it was worth in that. And then I can set this to all students, or I could change it and, select specific students that are in that class. And then I can click assign. Okay. Now, as the student, just switch over to a student screen. Okay, so here's that sample class. Right, and then I can go under classwork. I can see the most recent assignment, and the student then can click on that. Okay, and they'd be able to take the assessment. Now, since I already submitted the assessment, it's not allowing me to take it again, but the student would see this quiz just like we saw it in this preview here. So it would look like this had they opened it. Okay, not like that. They would have seen it just like you and I had taken a look at this when we first looked at the preview. Now, I can go back, by the way, and go back to my settings, and I can go under quizzes. Under general, and I can take that box and I can uncheck it, limit to one response, and hit save. And just so you can see the difference. Okay, let me switch back now to the student account. sample classwork. All right, now when I click on this link, it should open up the assessment and it won't tell me that I've taken it already. Okay, so that's the difference between having that one box checked or not. Okay, and again, the students would then complete this. And then you would have a second response to look at. So I'll just show you that real quick before we wrap up. Let's put in any old answers. Next. Okay, and then I hit submit. All right, now, as the teacher, let's go back to the teacher account. In the form, you can see there's now 2 responses submitted. So if I look at the summary, okay, the summary looks a little bit different. If I go back and look at the question, right, by question, I can see that if I go back to this first question, you can see now I have 2 responses. One student responded with the answer plant, the other animal. Or I could also look at the individual responses and look at each person individually. So here was my first student. Okay, Jane Doe. And then I can click this arrow and this would then go to my second student, which happens to have the same email address. All right, and then this is Bill Doe. And I could look at their responses, right? So this is almost like flipping through each student's paper assignment. This is what this section is. Right. I could also open up that spreadsheet, which I had opened already here, but I'm going to close that. Right, so here it is. And now you can see that it's been updated. I now have 2 student responses. Okay, and you can see because I didn't grade the assessment, the short answer response, that's a really low grade. But again, if I go in as the teacher and I'm on that student's paper, okay, so I'm on the individual and I scroll down and I find that short answer response. If the student did really well, they get 6 points there. Edits are pending. I hit save. Now, if I go back in my Google sheet, you can see that their point value, their overall score just jumped up to 9 points from 3 points. Okay. All right. So then, in the end, what I usually do is I open up my, my on-course account for the gradebook, or whatever program you may be using if you're not in this district. And I keep this file open and I go through and I enter the grades from here and I have to transfer them manually into, in our case, OnCourse Connect. Okay. That's it. That's a quick tutorial on using Google Forms for student assessments and then reviewing scores. Okay. Maybe it wasn't so quick. Anyway, I think we've covered everything you need to know to get started. Good luck. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me by email. Have a nice day.